Welcome to Around the Horn in Wholesale Distribution with Kevin Brown and Tom Burton. Sponsored each week by LeadSmart Technologies, Tom, Kevin, and their guests review the news of the week and dive deep into the topics impacting manufacturers, wholesale distribution, independent sales agents, and the global wholesale supply chain. Whether it's M&A, SaaS and cloud computing, B2B e-commerce, or supply chain issues, we peel back the onion with our guests into the topics that impact your business the most.
Good to have you both, Jonathan Bein. Let's stop right there. Dr. Jonathan Bein. We've got to say that as well. And Tom Burton and Kevin Brown here as we get together every week. It's happy to have you with us, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Honored. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's been a while in the makings to get you here. You're a sought-after speaker and researcher and so forth. I'm going to do a little bit of our intros that we do every week, a little bit of our housekeeping, and then we're going to learn a little bit more about Jonathan as we go. But again, I'm Kevin Brown. I'm here with my lifelong friend and business partner and co-founder of LeadSmart Technologies, Tom Burton. We get together every Friday morning on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live. We do that at 9 o'clock Pacific time, and we get together and we review the news of the week. We do that through the format of our Around the Horn in Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing newsletter that we review. That goes out to about 10,000 people every week, and what we try and do is take news from all kinds of resources, including Jonathan's firm, the Distribution Strategy Group, and bring that data and information into our followers and our subscribers and share that information, not just about information about the economy and tech and M&A and sales and marketing, but how that impacts wholesale distribution and manufacturing. And we do this again every week. When we're done with the live show today, our editor and producer takes all of that data, puts it into a format so it can be out on the podcast circuit later in the day. So whatever podcast platform that you might be listening in on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it might be, if you don't get our newsletter and you would like to, just let us know. There's two ways to do that. You can do that through simple email to hello@leadsmarttech.com. And secondly, you can do that to our website for the podcast, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com. So if you're listening in on the podcast, you won't be seeing the newsletter that we have. So again, if you'd like to get that, let us know. The only way we're able to do this each week is because we have the sponsorship of the company that Tom and I work for, LeadSmart Technologies. LeadSmart has developed an AI-enabled CRM and customer intelligence platform developed and designed exclusively for wholesale distribution and manufacturers. So we bring this show to you, and we hope you enjoy it. And the best thing that you can do for us is if you enjoy what we do each week, click the subscribe button, click the follow button, leave a review, forward the newsletter to your friends and whatever it might be, and we'll bring more people in to do more of this, which will also allow us to entice guests like Jonathan to join us on an ongoing basis as well. So enough of the housekeeping. Did I miss anything, Tom?
No, you're good. Hey, I wanted to say good morning to Brian. It's good to see him back. I haven't seen him for a while. Good morning, Brian. And yeah, if you're out there, please jump in, say good morning to Jonathan. Don't have to say good morning to Kevin and I, but Jonathan, definitely say good morning to. So.
Very good. So Jonathan, before we dive in, how about a recap of your journey to where you are today and what you're doing today with DSG and the famed Mr. Heller as well?
You bet. So I grew up in technology. My training is in computer science with kind of an emphasis in linguistics and music, and these things actually all come together. So I did a lot of things in the tech world before getting into distribution. I had about 100 software developers working for me at one point.
Wow.
And we were working with a lot of telecom companies, a lot of healthcare. I was interim CTO of a healthcare informatics company that had a very successful exit. I stepped out after 9/11 to have my first midlife crisis, and organized my sock drawer in my house. And I was like, well, I better find something to actually do. So I started doing interim CXO consulting, where X could be E, M, or T, depending on the technology. And I did that for a number of years. And then I met Ian Heller in 2008, and I fell in love with distribution. And I had been doing a number of very analytic-focused types of consulting, whether it was understanding value of an offering, the ROI of an offering, value calculators, market sizing, pricing, very left-brain analytic approaches. And I found that distribution was a much richer arena for the things that I love to do. Even a smaller distributor has probably a couple thousand customers, probably 10,000 or more SKUs, and you multiply those two numbers, you get a bigger number. And that ended up being a rich arena for the analytic life that I want to pursue. So Ian got me involved, and what we just say about, he's the word guy, I'm the numbers guy. We have enough of a corpus callosum that we can actually communicate. He's the right brain guy, I'm the left brain guy. And we have a number of different descriptors, but for distribution strategy, very briefly, is we've got two things. We've got content. We'll talk a little bit more about the conference that we're doing later on, but we put out a weekly webcast that could be a best practice. It could be a panel of technology companies, it could be a panel of distributors, it could be a show a little bit like this. That's one side of our business. The other side of our business is we've got analytics software for estimating the size of a customer's wallet, how much they're spending by different product categories, how much you have left that you could sell them. And then we have another product for measuring and improving customer experience. So
that's fantastic. It astounds me because I'm a devotee of the content that DSG puts out. It astounds me the amount and the quality of guests and so forth that are there each week. And we try and every week. In fact, I would be shocked if we went back through the archives of this show and there wasn't a week that we didn't mention something from content from your organization. So I'm excited that you're with us today. We kind of do a deep dive. Two things come to mind, though, that before we move ahead. One is you and Ian have a lot. I'd say, Tom, the relationship that Tom and I have is very, very similar. How our brains work and so forth. And I always say there's a Venn diagram that Tom and I meet in the middle with a lot of similar skills. And while I don't have anywhere near the technology skills, Tom's a computer scientist by education and started and exited multiple software companies. And I'm a peddler of safety equipment and industrial supplies my entire career. And we came together to start our technology company to solve problems that I had in my entire career. But there's a crossover where his technology comes into business, and Tom enjoys marketing as well. And I love technology, but I don't understand it well enough. But there's I think, a nice crossover similarity to you and Ian there. Although I would never for a moment consider myself anywhere near in the same stratosphere of writers as Ian. So,
but you two have that relationship. That's terrific.
Yeah.
And so if we continue down that path, so Ian would be the creative, I would be the analytic, right? So you'd be the creative for your business, Tom would be the analytic. But each of you has enough of the other that it works. It's not like it's split down the middle.
Right.
So yeah.
Yep. Tom would suggest that I have all of his good qualities and he has none of my bad in that crossover.
Yeah, I've been really holding back on saying much of anything here. So let's move on to let's go on to the news.
Yeah. Before we do that, I got a quick question for you though, Jonathan. You had mentioned that technology and music piece.
Yes.
Is that where you and Dr. Lynn Chase first connected? Was through music or was it through science?
It was through science, and I actually didn't know about her music background until about 4 years ago. But she and I worked at Martin Marietta back in the days of symbolic AI. We were among the first AI people in Colorado. She was doing stuff on, Mars.
Yeah, Mars landing stuff, right?
Mars, and I was working on space station stuff. So
okay, gotcha. I just thought that connection might be there. She was a guest. I met her through your AI event last October, got to know her a little bit. She's been on the show as a guest and was just phenomenal. And what a unique human being, huh?
She's incredible. She's a giant.
If we're talking about Dr. Lynn Chase, Lynn is, Jonathan, tell me if I'm wrong here, but a world-renowned expert in AI and machine learning, but just a phenomenal human being, lived on a sailboat, plays like 25 instruments, who knows how many languages she speaks. If you're interested in any of what she has to say, you could go back to our aroundthehornpod.com website, or to LinkedIn, the LeadSmart Technologies page. Scroll back a few months, you will see her episode there. So Tom, take us to the news, would you?
Yeah, so we're starting off with our usual economy and supply chain.
Yeah.
And the first article here, Federal Reserve minutes, policymakers saw a longer path to rate cuts. So the only thing I can think of is they'd been finally listening to the show here and listening to what I had to say and realized that probably one rate cut this year was the right strategy. I think that's what happened. That's what, if I'm reading this article.
Jonathan, before we go any further, not sure if you're aware, but regular listeners to the podcast would know. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, Jonathan, but Tom and I have been friends since kindergarten.
Oh my gosh.
So we don't pull a lot of punches with each other. We were behaved when we're together with our wives, but otherwise not so much. But we have a big steak dinner and some wine riding on what I'm a believer there's 2 rate cuts this year. Tom's that there's at the most 1. And so each week we talk about this a little bit. So little context as we have this discussion.
Well, you've been together since kindergarten, and you're each sitting in your assigned spots.
Yeah. Very good.
We're used to it. Yeah, we're used to it.
Yeah, very good.
So no, I mean, and it's interesting, right, is the market really has gone crazy since the last meeting for whatever reason. But I think what they came through and said is we're not expecting to raise anymore. And
there's a little bit of a threat of that there for a week or two, right?
Yeah.
Some people.
But I think we're still, everything I'm seeing, I think we're still sitting at that 1, and seems like that's basically what's in so many words being said in here. So,
yeah. Well, I think that this article talks a little bit about this from a standpoint of, there were some people talking about some potential raises. Every time I see this, it just astounds me. 11 hikes that there's been, over the last since 2022 and 23, that being done. So they said that one of the quotes here was such concerns of rate speculation, the Fed might consider raising rather than cutting its influential benchmark rate in the coming months. Indeed, the minutes from that May meeting noted that various officials mentioned a willingness if inflation reaccelerated. But then there was more talk later from Powell and others that kind of were like, no, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens next. I'm just, we're going to talk in a few minutes about some other metrics. I'm going to throw this out before we even get to that article to Jonathan. One of the things that I've been saying, Jonathan, for a long time is, and neither Tom nor I claim to be economists, so we just pretend for a few minutes on Friday mornings. But I've been questioning for a long time whether we're using the right metrics related to inflation based upon the markets and the conditions. One of these days, I'm going to stop talking about this and go do all the research about when, did this 2% number come in, all of the metrics that they use, because we just live in a different world than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I kind of question sometimes if we're using the right metrics or not. But that's one guy's opinion. Any thoughts on rates, Jonathan? What sentiment-wise?
11 in 2 years is a lot. 11 rate changes in 2 years. I feels like I missed some of those happening.
Yeah, that's what happened when I read that.
I got accustomed to them happening because they were so frequent.
Yep.
And they were every other month or a little bit more than that since that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, let's jump to the next articles, because this kind of ties in to the same thing that maybe this will help us a little bit getting to those reductions. Next article that we talk about here is from CNBC. Talks about consumers punting big purchases like pools and mattresses. But, this ties right back to when we talk about consumer pricing, wholesale pricing. These are all tied back into the decisions that the Fed looks to make on all of these things. And, what we've watched is this exuberance, I think, coming out of COVID. And, Mrs. Brown and I were talking about this yesterday, that we look back and we realize, we spent more than we should have during that time. And we like to think that we're probably pretty, responsible in general compared to some. But now we're seeing this, consumers we're starting to feel that slowdown is the conversation that's getting started now. Any takeaway on that, Tom?
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of homework on this after our last episode because I really wanted to understand it a bit more. And it's not easy to get clear data, but here's what I've discovered, right? And some of this is pretty well known. Consumers as a group, and that's obviously a very broad group, savings are at the lowest level that they've been in many, many years. Credit card debt is at the highest level that it's been at many, many years. Yet, as consumers, what we're spending most of our money on right now is not these big purchases like they have here, but experiences. And whether that's eating out, travel, whatever, which aligns with what I saw in Vegas a couple weeks back. It was just people spending money like crazy on experience. Now, what doesn't quite resonate with me, and I'd love your guys' take on it, or anybody who's listening, is the reason that they say that so much money is still being spent on experiences is that people are still kind of, coming out of the COVID lockdown phase, and they're going to go do everything and anything they couldn't do. But that's now getting to be 2 years ago, right, or longer. Yep. So it seems a little, the pent up demand seems to be, you would think that would have reduced a bit. But again, that's what the quote unquote experts are saying is they're continuing to spend. And the reason that they're continuing to spend is that they have equity in their home. They have the wealth factor of their home equity. They have the wealth factor of their 401k. Even though that money may not be immediately accessible, there's still that feeling that, hey, I've got this wealth. And so that's what's actually happening. So anyway, it's kind of ties into a lot of the stuff that's here.
My immediate hit on reading the article was what you shared, Tom, which is that it's about credit card debt. And people are tapped out on either credit card debt, lines of credit, et cetera. Right. And so the big ticket items are getting deferred.
Yeah, it made an interesting comment. One of the CEOs that was commenting here, it says that this is all happening at a pivotal moment for the national economy. The average Joe has been contending with the double whammy of high prices and borrowing costs, while economists and policymakers are trying to gauge the impact this has made. So I think this is a different type of, pre-recession, call it whatever you want, than we've seen historically. And I think a lot of that, as we say, is tied to what happened during COVID and so forth and coming back. In fact, Paul Kennedy with Dakota Supply Group just commented, did everybody buy their stuff during COVID when they couldn't have experiences? And I think he's spot on with that.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Right. Yeah. And now it's gone from stuff to experiences.
Right.
But I think it's got to level out unless people are still thinking, okay, I got to get these experiences now because I never know when the next COVID's going to occur. Don't know. It's not my mindset, but I don't know if I represent the average
consumer. No, what I think to Paul's point there too is, and by the way, Brandon Lee's with us. Thanks for being with us today, Brandon, and signing in. We see pretty regularly, we get like comments all the time from people that are like, hey, I made a comment, but it doesn't show up if they're through LinkedIn sometimes, but that's okay. We appreciate those that are with us and trying. But, as I think one of the things that we see a lot of with this is, and it's maybe not as bad in my house, but it's there, is I don't know that the Amazon stops have slowed down that much. Certainly, as I look in my neighborhood, the Amazon truck and the UPS trucks here as many times a day, I think, in the neighborhood as it was during COVID. So I think there's a lot of people that have just kept that buying spree that they've gone on is in the same way. So, Brandon, did you notice Brandon's comment there before we move on, Tom?
Yeah. No, he says, I don't think it's a conscientious thing, but I agree that experiences are more important to people than stuff after COVID. And
I think the stuff might have become a lifestyle. It's just a cycle that people are in. So,
but those big tickets that they're talking about, pools and right. big ticket things, maybe those are going to slow down. I don't know what that has. Good, and that all comes back to distribution and manufacturing potentially to some degree. But
absolutely, that comes right back around to that setting. one last comment related to this, and there's a quote out of this article, and it says, "This matters because it adds to a growing picture of consumer spending finally slowing down as experts had long anticipated. That means that the Federal Reserve may get the sign it's been waiting for, that interest rate hikes have had their intended effects of tightening the economy, which could be good news for investors and consumers." So,
and I've said this before. No, I've said this before.
That said two. What I just read.
Okay. Did it say two? Okay. All right. Well, I think there will definitely be a lot of cuts next year. Yeah. I just say in between now and the end of the year, I think it's going to, as we go into next year, it's totally going to start to kick in, and I think we'll see a lot more cuts.
Yeah, good. So a couple of things before we jump ahead. Good morning to Mike Mortensen from ARG Industrial. It's great to have you. Always like when Mike's with us. He's been on the show with us twice before. Appreciate seeing him. And then Brandon made a great comment here. He said it's also, and this is astute. So really astute, I think, is that it's also a culture of a younger generation that experiences are more important than stuff. And I think you probably saw that on your Las Vegas trip, Tom, is that, there's people there, their car barely got into the parking structure, but they're buying $40 cocktails, right? So it's an interesting about
$40 cocktails and $100 movies at the Sphere. So
yeah, that's the experience. But that ties back to, what my wondering about is how we track the economy in this country, if it needs to have some adjustments tied to it based upon how and what people do and how our business life works, because things are different than it used to be. So
I think, Kevin, to that end, we're seeing new configurations of employment, wages, inflation, and stock market that we haven't seen. Right. So we may be in a different kind of world now.
Yep. Great comment from Marty McLaughlin, and he's from the Mosaic Group and formerly the chief marketing officer at affiliated distributors. So we got some great comments coming today. Marty says, "I think many are de-stuffing." Yeah, I like that. I wish Marty was live with us to tell us how he came up with de-stuffing. That's from a marketing guy right there. Big purchases may align to real estate transactions, and many aren't selling to keep their 2% interest rate. So good point there. And then
I like this one. If lunch costs $80, it's now considered an experience. I like that. Right. Chipotle for $10 is not an experience, but
yeah,
$80 for a hamburger and a drink could be.
But you know what? It's ridiculous when you go to, Jersey Mike's and get 2 sandwiches and 2 drinks and 2 chips, and it's $35. It's like, how did it's not fast food anymore. Might as well go to the restaurant and spend $5 more and have something better. Hey, Tom, before we jump ahead, and I know we need to for time, I wanted to welcome Jason Bader with us. It's nice comment. Jason's got a great podcast himself, and we're appreciative of him being with us today. So thanks for joining us. Happy to have you with us. Have invited him to join us on the show. If he's open to that, we'd love to have him sometime. And so we'll go from there. And Brandon says to Mike Mortensen, mic drop moment. So very good. All right. So now this ties into, as we're talking about how they look at things, another article here from Reuters about the New York Fed announces a launch of a new supply chain pressure metric. I think this is an interesting piece, right? And I don't want to tie this to me being right, and I don't want to say that that's what they're doing, but it almost feels like somebody's saying, okay, maybe there's more we need to look at. And supply chain pressure has not been traditionally part necessarily of what the Fed looks at.
Well, I think it's broadening, right? I think it's very smart to broaden the analytics and the metrics. And Jonathan, love your take on this as an analytics and metrics guy. I think, I agree with you, Kevin, that we probably look at
Just stop there. Just stop there.
Okay.
I agree with you is enough.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did I really say that?
You said it out loud, and it's
really
recorded.
Okay, sorry.
There are witnesses.
Okay. Yeah. I do agree that the number of metrics that we tend to look at is small given the vast complexities of what we're doing. So I think adding different metrics and looking at different metrics and analytics is very smart. But Jonathan, what's your take on this availability index from what you're stamped? Do you think this is a valid metric, or what do you think is the pro and con of that?
Well, it depends. I think partly depends on the cost of creating and maintaining that metric. The cost of what we just went through was very high. So if the cost for this is reasonable and we can spot something and get ahead of it because of that, that's a win.
Yep.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I don't know what would be involved in actually doing it. It sounds nice on paper, right? But what is actually involved?
And what they're talking about is that they reference a new gauge to measure how widespread supply disruptions are and understand if availability is improving and track inflationary pressures and that impact that it has on local firms. So, we talk every week about supply chain issues, right? And how these are impacting things. And I think they're just going to start looking at least and this is just the New York Fed, right? But if they start and put that gauge in and start managing and looking closer at supply chains, I think it may trickle across. And maybe that's just one more thing that, helps versus the current metrics or stack of, what would you call it, a metric stack in your tech world? Instead of a tech stack, a metric stack, a series of metrics that they use.
Metrics, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I hope that they do and continue with that. And I hope it helps find a better balance. So as we go and move ahead, we have different segments of the newsletter that we send out every week. And as a reminder, if you're with us and only listening on the podcast, what you're not hearing or not seeing, I should say, while you're listening, is we have the Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution newsletter up. We send out every week to about 10,000 subscribers. And this just brings together information about manufacturing and distribution and e-commerce and marketing and M&A and sales and supply chain and distribution and the economy. And we try and unpack that news like we're doing now with guests like Jonathan and apply that to how it impacts wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So if you don't get the newsletter, just please let us know if you'd like to. hello@leadsmarttech.com, and we'll get you on the list. Or we have a website for the show, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com, and you can get that newsletter. So we're going to jump now into our manufacturing and distribution segment, tracking the Inflation Reduction Act's impact on U.S. manufacturing. That's from manufacturingdive.com. I thought this was good. Talks about this. It's been around since August of 2022, but things are starting to get rolling with it. I know, Jonathan, you had a few thoughts when we talked earlier.
Yeah, I think generally with technology adoption, it's easier to predict the fact of it than the when of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all these initiatives in the electrification programs and policies of the U.S. government to get to certain things by 2030, by 2050. We've heard some news about the slowdown of those. It's not a huge slowdown, but I think that what we see in this article is the level of energy on the manufacturing side to gear up for this. And that is going to play out in a positive way if distributors get after it over the next several years related to electrification. Let me give you just one example of the scale. So right now, there's they're looking to build 1 million fast chargers over the next number of years, and they expect to have 27 to 30 million slower charges in houses or in multi-tenant units. Again, they're thinking originally by 2030, so it slows down to 2032, maybe 2033. There's a little bit of friction in the adoption, but that's a massive shift, and the economic opportunities that will be driven for listeners to this show, I think, are significant.
Yep, I think that's a great point to look at from that standpoint. What's interesting to me as well is we talk regularly on the broadcast here about onshoring and nearshoring. Mm-hmm. And I think this is spurring even more of that, I guess I should say, to get people to dip their toes in the water and bringing things mostly from China and Southeast Asia that can have some difficulties with supply chain issues and bringing that back on shore. So it's great to see. They talked about 39 states saw factory and other project announcements in the law's first existence worth more than $86 billion. And continuing investment push is happening. So I think this is going to be something to continue to watch. And Tom, I think it's something we should look at consistently, is how that ties into the reshoring and nearshoring things that we see as well. Because the electrification side is a big part of it that we're going to continue to see.
Yeah, and I'm wondering is this going to breed kind of a whole new, or put together a new breed of distributors that have that expertise to deal with some of these types of high-tech items, right, that are coming out. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves from the distribution perspective.
Yeah, I think you probably will see that. I mean, we have LeadSmart customers who are branching out and have hold of new divisions of their companies that are starting to work on. So there's definitely some expansion opportunities, if not greenfield, with this as well. That's good. Well, as we move through this segment, Aggo Now closed their doors. The big reseller or wholesaler of and master distributor of industrial and MRO and construction and welding and safety products. All of a sudden this week there was a sign on the website that said closed down. And I've seen a handful of these in the past happen. Quite a few over the years. Jonathan, you've been following this for a long time too, and I don't think I've seen one of these where the announcement goes out and on the website is liquidations at their website, but that tells me that this has been going on for quite some time. If when the immediate announcement has all of the information about the liquidation happening, surprised me. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that.
The acquirer could be interested in the assets rather than the brand and the customers. Yeah,
well, that could be what I was looking at is that from this standpoint is that there looks like there's probably a receiver involved or potentially a receiver already involved in this, and that they're promoting the liquidation of inventory. I would love to see somebody come along and and it could be one of the other wholesalers makes a down and dirty offer on a good part of that inventory. My assumption is some distributors are looking at that have solid, strong balance sheets that will want to go in and buy some of that. But never like to see when somebody closes their doors. I think
the announcement was short on details.
It was, everywhere. And I looked a number of different places to find more information. You made a great comment when we talked about this briefly before we went live today, that the founding of this group, some of the founders of this group were NASCO refugees. And so I think one of the things that it says is that the whole concept of master distributor, wholesaler / reseller on this is it's not an easy business to be in. Margins are thin and numbers are tight. So we'll wish everybody there the best.
All right, should we move on to e-commerce and marketing?
Tom, what's the first one there?
Yeah, so this first article from Adweek, some advertisers are rebuilding their search strategies as Google AI search engine grows. So, this is a big topic, and one that's going to, I think, have a profound way of how we deal with search and how we deal with traditional, what we've known with search engines and so forth. But what it's talking about in so many words, right? And I see this periodically, I don't see it consistently, but if you go into Google and you ask it a question like how do I cook macaroni and cheese or something like that, it will use AI and actually try and come back and give you a detailed explanation, much like you would get in ChatGPT, right? Or whatever, a detailed AI explanation of how to make macaroni and cheese, or how to make prime rib, or how to make a Thanksgiving dinner, or whatever the case may be. Now, there's some search terms like restaurants near me or something like that obviously don't apply right now from these AI pieces and is more traditional search. But what the point of this article is that as people, how are Google selecting the information that they're putting into the AI response on how to make macaroni and cheese, for example. So if I'm Kraft, do I want to have my macaroni and cheese represented in there? And how do you do that? How do you do things that, as potentially people out there that you want to be represented in there, how do you do that on your website? How do you make yourself known? And very different than the traditional sort of keyword aspect of things that has existed predominantly from search in the past. So really some interesting concepts there.
Yeah, so different inputs and different outputs. Keywords versus sentences.
Right.
Transactional versus narrative or informational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Jonathan. No, please.
If you look at what's happened over the years, I wrote an article a couple years ago called the SEO Arms Race. And what we were starting to notice in different sectors, you look at HVAC, electrical, industrial, pick your sector. Companies year over year were growing the number of keywords that showed up in a Google search or in a SEMrush, however you want to measure what gets them to the first page. They were growing at 40 or 50% a year for a number of years. And as we know, the SEO game is constantly morphing. It's like a virus that you're chasing after that's constantly morphing. This is more than a morph. This is
yeah.
I would say this is a pivot. This is a pivot. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a major shift. So I think we're going to see the same thing again, though, that the SEO with AI is going to be this arms race that people are figuring out. It's constantly morphing. So
yeah, I think to go with that, and I'm glad you described it that way, the morphing of it, and pivot's a good word too. But what we're talking about now with this as well is we've historically done words, maybe some long tail words or terms and phrases or even sentences, but now we're mixing in video, images, and all of these different pieces. And this is, the importance of what we try and do here every week is loop this back to manufacturing and wholesale distribution, right? And there are some phenomenal organizations out there with large teams that are highly experienced at this. But we also meet throughout our travels, weekly or daily sometimes, and Jonathan, you may as well, we see, it's not for a lack of money or a lack of being a strong, good company, but companies that are way behind on these things, right? We see $250 million a year companies who have one person in their IT department and outsourcing their web design and outsourcing, SEO and all of those things. And this is a game-changing potential deal because you might be okay with where you're placing right now in Google search and so forth. But as this evolves, you could go from having spent a bunch of money with a third party a year ago and not done anything since, and you're maybe popping up a little bit on the first page, to going way down in the rankings because you're not following up on this. So I think this is, and the reason one of the reasons I selected this article is as a heads up, right? To now is the time to not only realize, hey, there's a whole lot of new different things happening with SEO that I need to be aware of, but it could radically change where I'm at on my search functions today. And if you're just using a third party or somebody, on your team does a little bit of research on SEO here and there and changes some terms, now is a critical time to really dig in and go figure out what is this going to do to impact your web presence.
Well, and I want to have Mike's comment here or question here. He says, how do you think that quality and overall content around product data will drive visibility given the AI search change? And my take on this is, traditionally, right, product data is here's what the product is, the specs, the things like that. But now you take that one step further and you kind of, if that's the what, then kind of bookend that with the why and the how. So why would I need this product? Why would it be of value? So forth. And then how do I use it? What do I do with it? How do I implement it? If I have those, the what, the why, and the how around that product data, because that's what those answers are providing. Yep. Right? Those answers are not just providing data about the what, which is traditionally what has happened in the transactional world. It's also saying, well, why would you want to do this? And how would you potentially want to do it? So I totally agree. You're going to have to improve the quality and overall content.
Well, but the big picture that my takeaway from this article was, and it talks about companies like going to their FAQ section on their website and putting videos on the FAQ section and images in the FAQ section, just besides, you know, how do I process a return, right? Because what we don't know yet, but it's very clear from this article, and Google's already saying in this setting, is video and images and maybe even voice are going to be major factors moving forward. So right now, and I think this goes back to Mike's question, is, and it really ties a lot even to e-commerce, right? We've got our PIMs and these different solutions where we've got beautiful taxonomy of all of these things, and we've done all this work, and all of these people. And Mike, my friend, I'm not saying this to you know, light a fire or be, you know, doomsday about this, but I think we need to be taking a look at and following very closely what is happening, because to Jonathan's point, I think earlier, was we've already known algorithms change all the time, right? But now there could be this monumental shift in how these because algorithms shift slightly typically, right? And now they could be a monumental shift in how they do it.
Well, but it's also, you said the multimodal, right? And how it's using those algorithms and those indexing to actually identify multimodal content, not just text content along the way. So there's the context of the content, which we just were talking about, and then there's the modality of the content as well.
Those are big words for me.
Yeah, those are big words for a first Friday morning. So anyway, I'll fill you in later. Okay.
Good. Any closing thoughts on that, Jonathan, before we go? That this is right up your alley, I think, a little bit.
A picture is worth 1,000 search attributes. I think this will reward those who've taken their product data seriously. And so if we think about the group initiatives like an AD, an IMARC, perhaps an association, the people that take product data seriously are saying, let's look at our top 10% of our SKUs, the 10% of our SKUs that represent 90% of our revenue. And by the way, it is that pronounced. It could be even more. They've already been applying efforts to enhance and enrich those top 10% of the SKUs. I think the folks that are taking that strategy, who don't want to just look like everybody else in AD or IMARC or whatever the group initiative is, are going to be better served. And part of what happens in those initiatives is you're adding more image and video data. So I think it's a call to arms for those who are not already taking their product data as seriously.
But I think that's huge what you're saying, Jonathan, from a practicality standpoint, is just focus on the most profitable. Let's start at your top 10%, right? Don't try and boil the ocean all at once. Start and then keep adding from there. That's very practical way of going about it without making it too overwhelming.
Well, and also utilizing the volume play that you're getting from the group initiative.
Yeah.
You may not get to enriching the second 10%. You may rely on what's coming out of the box from the group initiative that you're in. But one of the other expectations from users now is they don't want to see no image available for the bottom 90%. They're going to expect to see better faceted data for not just your top 10%. So there's an expectation about that is driven by retail and consumer.
No, I'm really glad you said that. And we talk about that constantly here, is that the B2B buyer, right there, we know now that 60+% are millennials, and they expect a B2C experience in B2B. And so to your point, and I'm really appreciative of what you were describing there, is, and it actually elicited a comment here with emojis attached to it as well, which is pretty special. But
we don't get emojis very often.
We don't get emojis very much. That's pretty cool. But I think
we expect no less from Mike Mortensen.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. So Jason commented that might be the quote of the day, and I think it might be right there. But Jason, you came in a little bit later, you mentioned, and there was some stuff out of a few others earlier that were pretty pretty funny. So we had some good.
That may be what you're referring to. So
yeah, that may be this week might be our top week in special moments with all of that. But in looking across the board at this, is we have to be thinking about changes that are happening and what's going on with our buyer, right? So our buyer is changing, and now we see some technology are changing. Now is the time to pay close attention, is I think the takeaway of the day. So, all right, Tom, what's next?
All right. Next thing in the marketing, e-com and marketing here. Sorry?
Promises.
Yeah, no, B2B brands making a promise to customers more likely to grow market share. I was really surprised when I saw this article. I've never heard this before, but I thought it was really good. Basically, the simplicity of it is, if you make a promise to your customer, when I was reading the article, I was trying to separate out, well, is that like a guarantee, or is it just more of a brand promise or a product promise? But either way, it's promise. If your company and your product is willing to make a promise, you're more likely to grow market share fairly significantly, are nearly 3 times as likely to drive a market share increase than those that do not. So anyway, I just found this intriguing and interesting.
Well, I think the real takeaway for me in this article talking about this was, and this is from can't remember who that article was from, Marketing World and Week. I'm sorry, thank you. And but this is an issue. We could probably dedicate a whole show to this, right? Is, am I marketing product or am I marketing brand? And which is more important, right? And it's almost a chicken and egg thing, right? You kind of have to have a little of both. But my big takeaway from this is that, and there was a comment here, says there's often a tie break where all things are equal. And what we are seeing is that the buyer group picks the bigger brand. So if you are competing against, and we think about, let's just make this simple into, distribution here, is if I'm a Milwaukee distributor and I'm displaying Milwaukee exactly the same as 142 other Milwaukee distributors across the country with the same, product data, the same images, and I'm trying to play the price game, I'm probably better off to grow my brand to go with that and then worry about the other part of it. So I think there were some interesting takeaways. Jonathan, any thoughts on this one?
I find the headline and the content of the article very counterintuitive.
Okay.
For this reason, that one of the big differences between consumer and business brands is consumer brands create a much bigger emotional hook.
Yep.
Whereas in B2B buying, unless I'm buying just a Milwaukee tool, if I'm making a sizable purchase in the B2B world, there are probably multiple people around the table as part of the decision. There's less emotion. There's less about relationship. Brands are about relationship. There's more about value. So it's more about value, less about relationship and emotion. But where my mind goes with this is, what does this mean for distribution? Because distribution is very weak on brands.
Yes.
The Milwaukee tools, the DeWalt's, and we can pick other notable B2B brands.
Well, maybe they're riding the coattail. They're trying to ride the coattail on those brands.
Yes.
Versus developing their own.
Those are manufacturers, right? Those are not distributors that you're
correct.
Talking.
Yep. So keep going on that, Jonathan, on that point. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, and so I think there's an idea among some distributors that it is about relationships, meaning person to person, pressing flesh, belly to belly, whatever metaphor you want to use. I think some of the best distributors do create effective brands. Obviously, we can think of Grainger.
Sure.
We can think of MSC. There's a number of folks that do this well. The broader dynamic of marketing analytic world is starting to come to the fore. So it's going to be less about relationships, more about value. And I think that's where brands will get created and distribution is about value,
yeah.
not about.
Well, we've never been at a better time or place where there's more tools available to do that. Even the things that, we've learned for early stage use of AI in marketing and content development, and having to Tom, your comment earlier about a promise, it doesn't have to be a guarantee. It has to be, this is what you'll get from my brand. In fact, Marty McLaughlin made a comment there about engagement beyond product and price. Brand promises culture, values, and community, right? And Marty's our marketing guy, our resident. And so I love to see that, right? So that someone needs to leave feeling that there is more to this than just, I saw a price on a DeWalt screwdriver or whatever it might be. So good stuff. Great article. If you don't get our newsletter and you'd like to, please let us know. And we can even get this particular one out to you. So Tom, we need to roll ahead, right?
We need to move really fast. Yeah. So,
we're going to go late today, everybody. We hope to have you stay with us, but Reuters article about Europe sets benchmark. We're moving into our tech and cyber and AI segment. So we've talked about over the months about the European Union and their AI taking kind of the lead on AI, and some from a regulatory with AI laws with some hard-hitting penalties that go with that. And that is coming next month. So the rest of the world is a little bit behind. I would say there's a little milquetoast to the U.S.'s response to that, which was a presidential
executive order.
Executive order. Thank you for that. Right. And from that standpoint, so this one has quite a bit of teeth behind it. Jonathan, any thoughts on this? Have you read through this, what they're doing in Europe?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very tough to enforce.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I haven't gone back and read it since December, but I'm even wondering now how relevant some of the things are, even that were looked at in December, based around some of the changes that are coming sooner than later. I think I completely agree. It's unenforceable. And I think the relevance, it becomes out of date very quickly. But anyway, we'll have to see, right? We'll see how it actually comes together.
So let me ask a little potentially controversial question to go with that. A lot of people said the same thing about GDPR, right? And tons and tons of people that violated it across the board, but a whole lot of U.S. companies that are doing business outside of the U.S. or in Europe are now using GDPR standards with email marketing and list keeping and so forth. So I'm going to push back a little bit and say, certainly they're going to try and do it. And I think what we may end up seeing here is a lot of US-based organizations, specifically manufacturers and large brands, are going to have to tie some of that together with how they're using AI and how they're doing things across the board. So we'll see what comes out of it, but they're not messing around with the providers on this standpoint at all.
GDPR is a lot easier to enforce.
Yeah.
It's much less squishy. And what was described in AI in general is much more squishy. And I just think because of that, it's going to be a different kind of outcome.
Yeah, I agree completely. GDPR is much more objective, A to B type of things. This is very broad. I think there'll be obviously some witch hunts and things going after people with deep pockets and things along those lines. I think a lot of stuff will get caught up in court for a long time. And I agree with you, Jonathan. I just don't think it's going to be very, very efficient and enforceable.
That's great. Well, that's a nice comment we just got from Jason there. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it. Good way to end a Friday. I'd like to wrap up the week. Thank you for that comment. We're appreciative of it. Before we wrap up on this part, I think what my view of what we're going to see with this is they're going to go after and pay very close attention to what Google and Meta and a lot of these folks that the European Union is already putting the squeeze on. That's where we'll see all of this first. And the hope is, though, right, the big reason that they put these pieces in place is about anti-terrorism and everything from bullying to racism and so forth. And maybe some of that is a value that comes out.
I think there's some great guidelines in there for sure. There's no doubt about it. it's just some of the specific AI stuff. Like I said, I haven't read it again. I probably need to go back and take a look at it again. But I do agree with Jonathan. Enforceability can be potentially squishy, is the word he used. So anyway.
Good. Well, let's jump ahead to a little bit of info about AI attacks and cloud security threats. Either of you want to get started on that one?
I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. We've talked a lot about security threats. And, obviously there's a lot of black hat, I'm sure, going on with AI, and how do we use AI as a way to, get through. And I think we're even seeing this now. The number of emails that I'm getting, phishing emails, are getting more sophisticated than ever. Even knowing like who our vendors are and who we're paying and things like that we're doing things. And AI is just going to potentially, again, allow them to be more sophisticated and more clever, if you will, on how they do some of those things that are there.
Tom, tell Jonathan that story that we experienced at LeadSmart last month while I was on the East Coast for a few days. Yeah,
it was pretty simple, but I got an email that came from Kevin Brown, it said, please pay this bill. And it even had a vendor that we were working with. And it had the amount of money that we would generally be paying that vendor. And Kevin had already paid that vendor. And as I unraveled it, it was a phishing email. So it really wasn't from him. And so somehow they discovered a vendor that we were working with. But had I not, in a bigger company, or had I not kind of pulled the string a little bit, it could have easily been passed on to accounting and just gotten paid like, it was just a normal bill.
Well, and the interesting piece of that, it was going to accounting.
Yeah.
But you get copied on those emails as a chief operating officer of our company. So that's where you caught it. So Jonathan, I'm at a conference in Charlotte, and I'm between the hotel and the conference center, and I'm getting these Teams messages from Tom. It's like, why is that so much? You said it was this much. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And 4 or 5 notes back and forth, I finally called Tom, and then he dug into it a little closer. And when you saw where the routing was coming from and a few things, and it was, what was it, $4,000 or $5,000, Tom?
Yeah.
But, in a larger organization, that could have gone right through, and could have gone right through for probably a lot more money. So it's a scary time out there with some of this stuff. So, Ian told us a story a while back about a cloned voice calling to an electrical distributor to ship a bunch of copper wire to a location that wasn't even a job site. So this is something to stay on top of. The last thing I'll comment on related to this topic is it's more important than we might think, because one of the things that this talked about was they were using the attacks on organizations like GitHub, right, where lots of software companies have their code stored. And so an attack there could might not feel like this is impacting me if I'm a manufacturer distributor, but it could if a cyber attack, an AI-driven cyber attack happens at a location where some code is stored for some of the software that you use. So something to pay attention to.
All right. Should we move on to this big conference that's coming up?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. What's it called again?
I don't know, something about applied AI for distributors. Jonathan, you know anything about this?
I've heard a little about it. I'll share what I know.
All right, tell us what you know.
It's all rumors, though. I mean, it's just kind of murmurs. But actually, the last topic we had was a great lead-in to this, because one of the speakers we're going to have is Teresa Payton, former White House CIO, talking about AI and cybersecurity. So she's one of the main speakers. But it's basically a follow-on conference to what we had in October of 2023, and it was a terrific conference then, where we're bringing together industry visionaries on AI. We're bringing together tech leaders in AI. We're bringing together smart distributors that want to get involved with AI of all sizes, from 10 million to 30 billion. And really, the goal of the conference is to give people the information they need to get going with AI in their own business. The assumption is that companies that take a leading role in AI are going to see outsized returns relative to fast followers and even more relative to laggards. So it's a intensive 2-day conference where there will be immersion in technologies that can be applied today of different types, and thought leadership from. We have one of the former C-level folks from OpenAI, Zach Cass, who's going to be speaking. Absolutely visionary. He spoke last year. I'm still taking in some of what he said, trying to parse it. Actually, I'm hoping to corner him and bring those things to ground. But those are the kind of speakers we're going to have. We're going to have the CTO of Grainger, senior CTO from Wesco, former CTO from Arrow Electronics, really significant players in distribution as well as technology companies. So I think if you are thinking about AI and how you get involved or are wondering, it's June 4th through June 6th in Chicago at the Marriott near O'Hare. So it's a very convenient get in, get out type of a situation. And you can find the agenda at appliedAIfordistributors.com. appliedAIfordistributors.com.
Great event last year. One of the things that in October, one of the things that I was really appreciative of at the event was the time at the meals and cocktail reception. You know, we've all been to a million cocktail receptions and stuff, but sometimes they're difficult. But I remember I was sitting at a table the night before the keynotes the next morning, and hopefully Ian doesn't get COVID again this year.
He's getting it now preemptively.
Okay, perfect. Because that was such a shame. It was because he got diagnosed with COVID or tested positive for COVID the night before the session, and I think you covered his keynote, didn't you? And fine job of that. But I just give you an example, and I've not experienced. And I shouldn't say I've not experienced, but it's not common. I was sitting at a table at the cocktail reception, chatting with Lindsay from Three Aspens Media, and having a great chat. And over walks and sits down. I can't remember who else was with us, but there was a couple other people at the table. We were chatting, and over walks Lynn Chase, right, that we were talking about earlier, one of the speakers. And we're talking a little bit, and Lindsay was commenting about this podcast. And we were chatting about it, and Lynn says, and she's one of the keynote speakers, right? And she's just stopping in at the tables chatting, and it wasn't at all in the conversation I had with Zach Cass in the hallway after his presentation. Genuine conversations with keynoters that weren't just flying in for their check. Lynn Chase at that discussion, she heard the word podcast. And Lindsay, she said, well, what podcast are you talking about? And Lindsay described the show we're on today, right now. And Lynn was on her phone subscribing to the Around the Horn podcast on Apple Podcasts. So there was such a genuine group of people there. And the way that things were set up was a nice opportunity for networking that you don't always see at these types of events. So
yeah, it's very much not about golf events or a architectural tour of the Chicago River. It's really about getting very focused on AI.
Well, and a great location, that hotel, I thought handled it really, really well. So good event.
Mike said it's the best one he attended in 2023, and that he's going to be seeing a big cruise. So that's a pretty good endorsement right there.
Yep, that's fantastic. Right. Good. Well, let's kind of move along. We're kind of going to run short on time, so we might not talk about everything today. But I did want to talk about this article from Supply House Times, because it ties back into the economic discussions that we had earlier. We're now in our sales and M&A segment, and this is from SupplyHouseTimes.com and magazine. This was about their 2024 Premier 150 survey results. Any takeaways from you guys? Jonathan, I know you had a couple of thoughts on this early on. Kind of ties back to the economic stuff we talked about as well.
Return to normalcy is the word that comes to mind for me for that's the HVAC group, right?
Yep, exactly right. Yep. So this was talking about PHCP and PVF distributors, which then ties into HVAC as well. So they're seeing this drop off, right, in 2023. And to your point earlier, is this just is kind of this balancing act to where we were pre-COVID with all the work that was done afterwards.
If you talk to CEOs, some of whom are on this call, 2022 and 2023 are tough comps to follow on. Mm-hmm. Your board's going to need to give you some forgiveness. Yeah.
I really was appreciative of this, and I think it's good. You know, sometimes you just read a headline, right? And that if you just read the headline about this, whoa, it's doom and gloom. And then as you dive a little deeper, you see. So I think it's good news is what we're kind of seeing is a balancing of things. It would be nice for everyone if we could get back to some reasonable interest rates, which will help on the investment side, on distribution and manufacturing, which would be great. This was a phenomenal article just based upon the amount of data that's there. I mean, I would say of all of the articles in today's newsletter is that it's just phenomenal from a standpoint of segment size, relevance to the segments, and so forth. It's powerful. So.
Hey, I just wanted to address a question. Someone asked, where is the more information on the conference we were just talking about? If you click the link right here, it takes you right to the conference page, but it's appliedaifordistributors.com. Maybe we can post in the LinkedIn feed that's there, but appliedaifordistributors.com is the thing there. I just wanted to hit that question.
URL. Thank you for that, Tom. Good.
All right.
Any closing thoughts on the data out of that article?
None for me.
Okay. Well, as we dive kind of ahead, we're going to pass a little bit by this. There's an article about DuPont splitting off into 3 separate publicly traded companies, kind of along the lines of what 3M did recently with spinning out their healthcare division. It's kind of funny in that article. I don't know if either of you know or remember this, but I think it was 2017, they brought some groups back and then split some things off. So it's almost a cycle. And my guess is what we're going to learn out of this is that some of this is tied to the lawsuits. They call them forever chemicals. I think that they have some risk where 3M had some big risk within their main company tied to some earplug lawsuits that was worth billions. And so it'll be interesting to watch this one, but they're splitting off into 3 publicly traded companies at DuPont. So, and if you're in the safety or industrial world, you're doing a lot of business with DuPont.
Yep.
So, as a distribution company. So we have a segment each week called Industry Scuttlebutt. There's just 3 key topics here this week. We won't spend much time on them. AD announced their newly elected board of directors for affiliated distributors. Congratulations to that group as well. And then we look at Whitecap with some acquisitions, Ferguson with some acquisitions. Again, this is all coming from our Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution newsletter as well. And so we can kind of skip over that, Tom. Why don't we just kind of start wrapping up? There's a couple
I have to say that I was excited when I saw the members in the board of directors. We have LeadSmart customers now in there. We have a lot of friends of the podcast here. So that was a great collection of members of that new board.
That's a great point. Yeah, we have customers and friends there. So, and that beautiful.
We have friends in high places now.
Yeah. Well, beautiful.
And audience members.
That's right. And audience members.
Exactly right. Yep. But Paul Kennedy that commented earlier with us today is in that picture. And, but it's not hard to find Paul Kennedy's face in a picture somewhere because he is moving fast. He's he never stops between his work with NAED and affiliated distributors and other industry groups. It's great. So that's good. So anyways, let's kind of wind our way down today, Tom. Before you do, you want to hit that point about that must-see on-demand webinar?
Yeah, so Kevin and I did a webinar earlier this week called What is Smart CRM and Why Does It Matter to Your Business? And we now have it on demand. So you just click that link, go check it out. It's we've heard from a lot of people that it was very informative and educational. It's not a salesy webinar. or anything like that. So if you're interested in kind of the future of CRM and AI and the role of AI and CRM and how to avoid CRM becoming a 4-letter word in your business, there's some good stuff in there. So it's just free. Just click it and it's right there.
That's good. All right. Well, our last segment there is our good read segment that we do each week. If you get the newsletter, take a look at that. It was kind of interesting. It said Biden, the Fed, and everyday Americans can't agree on the economy. And
nor can we, right? So I feel a lot better. We can't agree either. So I guess if Biden and the Fed can't do it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It will be interesting to see what happens this year. I'm still at my 2 cuts because I'm not sure that the Biden administration and their presidential run can afford not to have something happen with cuts. But we'll see. Jonathan, what's your take on how many cuts this year, if any?
I'm going to go with you, Kevin.
Yep, you see 2?
Yep.
All right. Enough said, Tom.
All right, Jonathan, you can come and join us for steak and wine when that happens. So,
yeah. Okay. Lynn Chase said she will help you the moderator of it all as well. So
okay.
That's good news. Anyways, Jonathan, any takeaway from the day? Does your head spinning, or you think a bunch of lunatics here? Or did you have a good time?
Tremendous time, and I love the amount of ground that you cover in the show.
We move fast.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I had an executive from a major player in the manufacturing side of things tell me a while back. I've been trying to get him to join us for forever, and he said, "I don't have anything to add." And there is such a wealth of people out there that have years and years of experience. So we're continuing to work on our guest list. We've got, I think next week is Eric Hopland, the CEO of National Association of Wholesalers, will be with us. Esteemed guests like you, Jonathan, we're kind of, this is a cliche, but it's true. I'm kind of humbled, right? Our podcast started out 91, are we, Tom? 91, 92. 92 times we've put the newsletter out, and probably 85 live sessions like this. And the fact that folks like you, Jonathan, and your business partner and our good friend Ian Heller, and folks like Eric next week, and Mike Mortensen that's been with us, and Paul Kennedy we mentioned earlier, I'm grateful. So thanks for being with us today.
Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Holiday weekend. Big plans, Jonathan? What's going on in Colorado where you're at? You're in the Boulder area, right?
Yeah. Just going to try to get into nature.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, same here.
No, you should be coding.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No nature.
I got some AI work to do this weekend, so all good. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for contributing. Have a great holiday weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.
That's right. Do good things, be kind, and be safe.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our guests. Each week, we try our best to dig into the topics that are impacting your business. So please reach out to us and let us know how you think we can make the show better, or topics you'd like for us to tackle or talk about more often, and even guests you'd like to see join us. We're looking forward to bringing you next week's session, and hope that until then, you stay safe, stay focused, and do great things. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review to help others in wholesale distribution get access to the conversation. And finally, please check out our sponsor, LeadSmart Technologies, and their manufacturing and wholesale distribution industry CRM, customer intelligence, and channel collaboration platform. That's LeadSmart Technologies at leadsmarttech.com.